Not even 2 minutes ago, the sky was absolutely clear. And of course, as soon as I sat down to record the podcast, this is what I get. Nice. You know what? I don't care. I'm gonna record anyway. So welcome to the newest episode of, I guess, our knitting podcast. And I don't have that many projects to show you today, but everything I've been knitting lately, I've been really enjoying. So I'm happy to share. And please, before we begin, consider subscribing to this channel and also let me know in the comments what you are working on. I'm always looking for more knitting inspiration. So last time we spoke, I talked about how I finished knitting this shawl, which is a free pattern by Drops. It's called Fresh Rain, if I remember correctly. I did not have enough yarn to do the ribbing, so I had to quickly bind off with an I-cord before I ran out of yarn. And it was curling on itself quite badly, so I wasn't sure I would be able to block it out nicely. I considered maybe unraveling it and doing it again, but at the same time, I didn't want to ruin this alpaca yarn because it's quite fluffy. And I just decided to go for it and block it and see what it looks like. As you can see, it blocked out beautifully. I didn't have to unravel anything. And let me tell you, I've been wearing this shawl so much. I think during the last month, I either wore it every time I went out or had it in my bag in case I wanted to wear it. So it's been a really successful project for me. Also, this yarn is really lovely. Unfortunately, I can't get any more of it because this brand just doesn't ship to where I live. I only had 2 balls to work with, but I'm pretty sure there are other baby alpaca yarns that I will enjoy just as much, that would be just as pleasant to work with and just as soft, so it's not a problem, I think. Anyway, my most worn finished object in March. I just adore this shawl. My next project is something I unfortunately don't have with me anymore because it was a gift to my grandma and I already gave it to her. And it was also a free pattern. It was a shawl pattern, which I still can't pronounce the name of, so it'll be on the screen. And I knit it using Drops Sky, which is a really weird chainette yarn. It stretches quite a lot. It looks a lot chunkier in a ball than it becomes when you actually start knitting with it. But it created such a unique looking fabric, such a nice texture that now I kind of want to make more things from it. But at the same time, I don't have a good track record of Drops yarn holding up over time. For example, I knit a pair of slippers and a pillow cover with Drops Boucle, and I really loved this yarn at first. But both the slippers and the pillow look awful now and really kind of unpresentable. It built quite a bit and also lost its color when I washed it, so I just don't know. I'll have to ask my grandma how the shawl holds up. Also, when I was gifting this shawl to my grandma, I received the most backhanded compliment and like strange comment about my knitting from a relative. Basically, he asked how long it took me to knit the shawl, and I thought about it and figured out that it was approximately like 40 or 50 hours of knitting, to which he said, "Wow, that's so quick. I thought knitting takes much longer than that. It's such an effortless hobby to have." I really wanted to ask him when was the last time he spent 40 or 50 hours actively working on something, but I decided to keep it polite. Let me know if I'm overreacting to this. I'm not saying I'm easily offended about my knitting or that I'm knitting for the praise of how long it takes and how hard knitting is, but I think it's still important to acknowledge that it does take a long time and a lot of work to hand knit something. For example, last time I raved about how quickly I finished a cardigan on 10mm needles, but it still took me 4 days. No, knitting is not easy and effortless. Let me know what was the weirdest comment you received about your knitting, or again, a backhanded compliment. I really hope I'm not alone in this, but let's move on. Not knitting related, but look at these beautiful flowers I cut. Beautiful. My next finished object was quite a journey, honestly. I really wanted to use the skein of this Life in the Long Grass Moon yarn that I had. Of course, the obvious choice would have been to make a shawl from it, but I really wanted to see if I can stretch it into a crop top or just sleeveless top. I found this pattern, which is called Stop Crop. It was exactly what I needed, so I started knitting it. And then when I got to the shaping, I realized that it has a major mistake in the instructions, because of course when you split for the front and back, you start knitting flat instead of knitting in the round. And the instructions for the decreases for the shaping were still for knitting in the round. It would have been row 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, and row 2, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, which will, if you turn your rows, will create just a moss stitch texture. I thought for a long time maybe I'm reading something wrong, maybe I have the wrong stitch count. I ended up just messaging the designer to ask her if there was a mistake or if I'm doing something wrong, and she confirmed that there was a mistake. And the fact that I couldn't follow the pattern's decreases instructions pretty much rendered it useless, so I just did my own thing. It just gave me the freedom to do whatever I want with the design, so that's exactly what I did. Also, when I started knitting it, I wanted to do the ribbing here in a contrasting sock yarn. As soon as I finished the ribbing and then proceeded to the brioche on the body, I realized I just don't like how this yarn looks with a sock yarn, because if you look closely, it looks like two really thin rowing strands lightly spun together, which is really different from how regular sock yarns look. Also, this has silk added to it, and of course regular sock yarn doesn't. So I had a choice. I could either unravel everything and start over, or I could see where the color changes and pull out the sock yarn so I can knit top down instead of bottom up. So I decided to cut the yarn, and when I did that, it left me with a really neat tubular cast on the body, which was surprising. I've never done a tubular cast on before. Maybe that's how you do it. I didn't pick up stitches from the tubular edge. Instead, I did a round of single crochets around the edge, and then I picked up stitches from there for my ribbing. And this created this kind of gap or ridge between the two rib textures, which I really liked. I actually repeated it for the neckline, even though I didn't need to. I could have just continued knitting with the live stitches in a different texture, but instead I bound off, did a round of single crochets, and then continued, because this division right here I think really makes it look more finished. As I said, I abandoned the pattern. I did my own shaping, and also another kind of bone to pick that I have with most of the crop top or sleeveless top patterns is that they usually have the same instructions for the front and the back. I know that it probably is easier to design the pattern that way, but that's not always what I want in a top like that, so I just did kind of a racer back. I really aggressively decreased at first, and then I just knit flat without any shaping, and then I just as aggressively increased, so I have the same stitch count at the back and at the front before joining it for the neckline. And instead of the ribbing as she suggests in the pattern, I just did an I-cord around everything. So this top used about 80 grams of that moon yarn, and I have a little bit left over still. And honestly, I only have positive things to say about this yarn. It feels really luxurious. I really hope it doesn't pill the more I wear it, and I didn't have to alternate skeins when I was knitting with it. There is no distinct change in color between the places where there was a big stitch count and really small, like for example here where there are just 3 stitches on the I-cord edge, but nothing clashes. So I really recommend this yarn. Again, I wish I could get more, but yeah, not available in my country. I honestly can't wait for the weather to get warm enough so I can wear this top, because first of all, I tried it on and it's really, really flattering. It has just the right amount of negative ease, and also it's really comfy. It's kind of a sports bra comfy, so can't wait to wear it. And the next project I wanted to talk about is something that I think for the first time in years I frogged and didn't start over immediately. And this is my Ilha sweater. I was sure that this pattern was pronounced Ilha, but it's Portuguese for island, so it's not Ilha, it's Ilha. So I apologize for butchering the name. I have nothing against the design. It's a beautiful design. and a really popular pattern. It has a long list of finished objects on Ravelry, but something just didn't click with it. I was working solely on this sweater for around a week because it was my travel project for when I was visiting my grandma and my dad. And I was really invested in knitting this sweater. I knit it on the train, on the subway, while I was watching a movie with my dad, while I was helping my grandma to prepare dinner by just chatting to her and knitting while she prepared the dinner. It was just a fun, positive project, but when I got back home and tried it on for the first time, I just realized it's not me. I just would not end up wearing this sweater, and I don't want to continue if I just know that I will either shove it in the closet somewhere or have to give it to somebody or will frog it anyway. As soon as I got this kind of hunch that something is wrong, I left it for a few days and then I tried it on again and decided I would frog it because it didn't suit me at all. Maybe somebody else would say that it did suit me, but for me, you know, if that's moving up, then I'm moving out. I just didn't want to continue with it. I think the reason I didn't like it was because of my yarn choice plus the yoke design, because the yarn I chose is, let me show you. It was this country tweed fine yarn, which is just a classic tweed type of yarn. And the yoke has both lace and cable detailing, so I think this added to the texture of this yarn gave it just too much of a boho look. And also it reminded me a little bit of the Noro yarn, and I apologize in advance. I'm not trying to offend anyone. I'm not trying to tell anyone what is beautiful and what is not, but I think that Noro is ugly most of the time. Don't come for me. I'm sure something that I like a lot you will find ugly. It reminds me of something recycled. So yeah, the sweater reminded me of Noro and boho style too much, so I still recommend the pattern. It's really easy to follow and you get into the rhythm of creating this cable and lace pattern really quickly. Great pattern, but I had to say goodbye. Once I was done frogging my Ilha sweater, I decided to take a little break from knitting just to kind of figure out what I want to work on next. And in the meantime, I read a book, which interestingly enough wasn't my usual science fiction or alternate history stuff. There were no aliens. Queen Victoria wasn't a monster in that book. So it was this book, Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I think I bought it more than a year ago and didn't touch it. And then when I picked it up, I just read it in like 2 days. Stayed up until 2 or 3 a.m. to read it. I think I even teared up a few times. It's such an engaging story. It's a memoir of a fictional Hollywood actress. It is set kind of in the last years of the Hollywood golden age and like the studio system and everything. It talks a lot about what it was like to be an actress or a star even when studios kind of ruled over this industry. And I just really enjoyed it, so just wanted to mention. Also, really interestingly, it's the first time I'm seeing something like that in a book. At the end, it actually has some topics and like discussion points for a book club, which I've never seen before. I've never been in a book club. It was interesting to go through this list of questions after I was done with the book. And if you want an easy but really engaging read, I highly recommend it. But then back to knitting. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, I also broke a pair of needles when I was working on the Ilha sweater. This is Knit Pro Ginger, which is my favorite type of wooden needles, but I sat on them and they snapped in like 3 places. So yeah, goodbye. But I finally found a project that I want to cast on for the yarn I talked about last time, which is this hand-dyed sock yarn, which the dyer specifically made per my request. So I wanted to find a really special project for it. But the more I looked at the pattern choices and kind of rummaged through my favorites list on Ravelry, I realized I want something simple for it because it's still a hand-dyed yarn and not every stitch pattern will look good with it. So in the end, what I decided to do is to go back to my dreaded pattern, my arch nemesis, I would say, which is the T number 1. If you watched my first podcast, you know my feelings about this pattern. I had too many issues with it, but I still did like the fit of the finished object, so I decided to knit the T number 1 again. But instead of stockinette, I chose this really simple stitch pattern, which is basically knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, as you do for the ribbing, and then the next row you just knit all stitches. So it's just a 2-row repeat. I really like how it's coming out. I chose a bigger size than I did last time I knit this pattern, which makes it kind of a slow burn, but I don't mind. I also would not be joining the two sides together to knit in the round after I'm done with the armholes, because I think the color will pull too much. I'm also really glad I saved my original pattern PDF, because I left extensive notes, which makes it so much easier to knit right now. I'm just enjoying this slow knit, but unfortunately it became too big, so I can't really knit it on the go anymore, but I'll finish it eventually. Another slow burning whip I have is this dress, which is from a pattern called Fluffy Me Blouse. It's a blouse, obviously, originally, and intended for 2 strands of silk mohair held together. But I really wanted to use the silk that I already had in my stash and wanted to make a dress from. And as soon as I saw this pattern, I realized it was exactly what I wanted for this dress style I envisioned. And this dress was supposed to go under my corset. I have a replica of an 1830s corset, or stays rather. I was fortunate enough to find a corset maker who made the replica exactly to my measurements, and it's one of the most precious things I own, maybe besides some of the things that I knit myself. There's no reason for me to own a corset like that, just besides the fact that 1830s is my favorite decade or era in fashion. I know some people don't like it because they find it too campy because of the hairstyles and the poofy sleeves and all of that, but I love everything about it. And the thing about corsets, you can't wear them as you do a bra. You need something between your body and the corset, and of course I don't really know how to sew, so I can't make a shift or a chemise to wear under it. And I wanted to make a dress from the silk I already had, just to wear it as a slip between, again, my body and the corset. But honestly, I tried it on after finishing the sleeves. I tried it on with the corset, and I just don't like the colors together, and the textures kind of clash, because this silk is Are you done? No, he's not done. This silk is kind of a cruelty-free silk. It's more rough, and it has a lot of silk slubs in it, which I don't mind, but when I put it against the satin fabric of my corset, the texture really clashes, and it makes this dress look kind of cheaper than it is. So I just decided not to use this dress with my corset. I'm just gonna wear it on its own, and I love how it's coming out. I also like the small change I made to the pattern. The yoke is knit on 3mm needles, and then you switch to 5 when you do the body to kind of accentuate the ruffles more, but you use 2 strands of silk mohair for both this part and this part. But since I'm holding the silk double anyway, I just did the yoke in a single strand, and I think it highlights the ruffles and this kind of change in texture even more. So I'm really enjoying it. As you can see, I've already done the sleeves, so now I can just try it on and knit it until I'm happy with the length. And also, I'm probably gonna run out of yarn, but I can order more of this yarn. The yarn I'm using is Yarna Eco Silk. As you can see, it's quite uneven, but it still has this lovely silk sheen to it. So I will just see how far my 2 remaining balls will take me, and then I'll order more if I need to. Maybe I'll be able to finish, but probably not. And 2 more whips. One is pretty much finished, but I don't count it as a finished object because I still have some work to do on it. And right now it looks like a little mushroom, but it's actually a cushion cover. It's a pattern from Camarose. I think it's called something really straightforward, like round cushion with smocks or something. And I'm knitting it with the vintage Kambgarn yarn, which I showed last time. And this was just a delight to knit, honestly. It was the first time I was knitting something in this smog texture. I've never done this before, so I was afraid that maybe I won't be able to do it right the first time, but the pattern explains it so well. The written instructions are so straightforward that I kind of got into the rhythm of it really quickly. The pattern says that you need to repeat this circle the second time for the other half of the pillow, but I'm not gonna do that because this yarn is quite itchy, which isn't a problem for me, but if my boyfriend wants to take a nap on this pillow, it's probably gonna be too uncomfortable for him, and I'm not sure blocking will soften it enough. So I want to add some fabric on the other side, which is gonna be tricky, but I will do my best. That's kind of why I don't count it as finished. It's not blocked yet, and it needs the other side and probably needs to have a specific round pillow to fit it. I think I'm gonna just buy some hollow fiber or maybe a thrifted pillow, whatever, to make it work, but I'll make it work. Now it's a mushroom. So the last whip I wanted to show you is something I cast on for two reasons. Firstly, I wanted to make another sleeveless top after I finished my crop top. And also I had 200 grams of this merino left over after I finished my Corshaven cardigan, which I'm wearing right now. Of course, here I held it together with the mohair, but I don't have enough of the mohair left over to pair it with the merino again. So I'm just using it on its own. And the pattern I chose is called White Top, and it's by Knitting for Olive. So far, I have nothing to say about this pattern. I'm just not that far along into it to have any opinions. I did read ahead in the pattern and the instructions seem to be really clear, but so far I'm just knitting this endless tube of 2x2 rib. So I'm gonna let you know how it goes. I'm excited to have the finished object because it's getting warmer and I want to have a stylish crop top. I already have a stylish crop top. I want to have a stylish sleeveless top to wear with like an unbuttoned shirt or something. Also, it's a portable project, which I really appreciate. And I don't have any acquisitions to share with you today. Knitting acquisitions, I should say. But I do have one major acquisition. I finally bought a new sewing machine. And this time I really want to learn how to sew. I really want to pass my title of the worst sewer on the planet to somebody else. Finally, I want to give it up. I so far had a lot of fun with that machine. I'm still super inexperienced and I'm doing so many things wrong, but I already finished my first sewing project, which I'm super proud of. Let me show you. It's actually a project bag for my white top. And my goal with this little project bag was to finish it only using the materials I already have at home. Everything about this little bag is thrifted or kind of upcycled. So these three fabrics are leftovers from a fabric store where I bought my pinking shears some time ago. I kind of patched them together quite badly, as you can see, but nobody will look here, so don't look. And the lining here is of course an upcycled bedsheet, which is a classic in beginner sewing. I'm really proud of how it looks, honestly. I think it looks really neat, especially considering the fact that half of the time I didn't know what I was doing. It also has a little pocket, which you can put markers and such into. And these two things, I don't know the names of the things, but this closure here and this handle here don't have an interfacing. And that's because, as I said, I didn't want to buy anything for this little bag. I wanted to use only the materials I already had lying around somewhere, and I didn't have any interfacing, so it's fine. It's fine as it is. It kind of looks like a pillowcase, but it's forever going to be my first neat and not half-assed sewing project, so I'm really proud of it. Even the snaps or poppers are thrifted, so I really love it. Right now, I'm just absorbing all the information I can get from YouTube tutorials for beginners and Skillshare courses on sewing, just so I can at least be comfortable in maybe altering my clothes and doing some really simple type stuff, like, for example, sewing a pillow cover to go with my mushroom. I'm getting there. And the machine I bought was Janome Juno 513, if you're interested. Maybe I'm gonna talk more about sewing in my upcoming podcast, but For now, I'm just slowly trying to not suck at sewing. And with that, I think that's all I wanted to talk to you about today. As always, I really appreciate you being here and watching. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you want to. If you don't want to, you still have to give this video a like. And as always, let me know in the comments what you are working on. Sewing, knitting, embroidery, crocheting, anything, let me know. And I wish you the loveliest day. Goodbye.